Hello and welcome to Botanica's Month 2 Block of the Month program. So today we are covering Month 2, which is the Sea Sky and Scallops block. Now this month is a little bit more intense than some of our other months. We're actually going to be doing 8 blocks instead of 4 blocks. So one of those sets of 4 blocks is going to be this one right here. So we have one colorway for this, and this is going to go on our quilt. And attach it like that, and then we have another one we're going to create 4, but instead of attaching it as a 4 square, we're going to actually do it horizontally. So we have 2 different colorways. I'm going to go through both of those, although they are very easy to stitch up. So just remember, just like the last time, you want to make sure you leave at least a ½ inch all the way around. And on this one, we are actually doing some quilting. There will be one advanced thing you need to know, which we will cover in this tutorial, which is how to skip around on whenever you're doing your stitch out. So I've already got my supplies here. I've got my light tearaway, my water soluble topper. I've got all my fabrics ready. In this particular one, I use the teal and the green thread for the machine embroidery part. And of course, I have my handy dandy tools. All right, let's get started. So if you recall last month, I used, since I'm using the Baby Lock Flourish, I had to use a size, the biggest size that this machine could handle. Since this is a 6 by 9, that meant my C size, which makes a 5.8 by 5.8 block, was going to be the ideal size for this machine. So as a result, I had to use the C file again. So last month I used the C file. This month I'm using the C file. You'll notice on those end of those files extensions we have different letter types. So on this one I'm using that size. So when this comes up, I basically load up the design. I don't make any edits whatsoever, no resizing, nothing. And I go straight over into embroidery, and we're going to stitch down our location stitch. All right, so now that I have my placement line, now I can put on my batting. And remember, like we discussed in video 1, I'm only going to use 2 of those lines, because where I'm sitting I have to kind of move around. Now if you've not had a chance to watch video 1, I do recommend you go by and review that one first. We do cover a lot of the supplies that I found useful for this that don't necessarily get covered anymore in any of the other videos. Okay, so now I'm going to tack down my batting. Just like we discussed last month, always make sure you have a nice flat surface, not on your knee, not up in the air, where you can cut off all of your excess. This really helps to ensure you don't actually accidentally bump out your fabric from the frame accidentally, in case you didn't tighten it down good enough. All right, so I've got this now trimmed down, so now I'm going to go back to the machine. And it's now going to show me where to put the next fabric. So this is the placement stitch for the next fabric. If you were not a fan of the flip and stitch from last month, because it is a bit of acquired skill, you're going to love this month. Because this month, basically, where you see it, you lay your fabric on top. There is no guessing. So I'm going to lay my fabric right, covering up that entire area, making sure I have a ½ inch up at the top. Okay, now that I've taken it out, I've got it stitched down. We're going to trim away here and here. Whatever you do, do not trim away the outside edge, only from the insides. Okay, let's stick it back in the machine. Do the next piece. All right, so that placement stitch is down. So now we're going to put in the next fabric. It's going to be the orange one. That one has stitched out. Okay. So here we have it. We want to make sure again we trim the inside but not these outside lines. All right, now we're ready for the next placement line. Okay, so now that we have our placement stitch, I'm now going to stick my fabric on top. So this time it's going to be your black fabric. And make sure whenever you're laying it down, you have that excess on the bottom and on the right. And also remember, I am using a fluorescent thread so you can see what I'm doing a lot better. You don't have to use a fluorescent thread at home. Again, make sure you keep this side because we're going to need that for later trimming. All you're really trimming is on the inside. And remember, always keep it on a flat surface. All right, and then back into the machine. Okay, so now that I've got that stitched out, again, I'm going to place my fabric on top. And I'm going to make sure I've got at least 2 inches down here, or at least half an inch is what we're going to trim it down to. So I'm just going to kind of center my flowers just a little bit, make that look a little bit nice, and then I'm going to stitch out the last one. And that's all we have for the laying down of the fabric. So like I said, even though we're doing 8, they actually stitch up really fast. And there's no stitch and flip, so, I mean flip and stitch like we did in the last one. So they stitch up fast and they're easy for putting down the fabric. But in this block, we are going to learn more features. So now we're going to learn how to skip around on a block and actually do it in a little bit different sequence than what they put in here. But let's get this last piece of fabric down first. Okay, so this is my last stitch out and my last cut off of fabric. And as a side note, I haven't mentioned this before, but on this particular block, you do want to try to get as close as you can to the stitch line because the stitch line is a little bit narrower. So in order to cover all that up, it just helps to get as close as you can, and that's where your duckbill scissors are going to come in really handy. If you miss some little small area, this is also where your mini duckbills will come in a little bit handy if you happen to get away from it just a little bit. Okay, back to the hoop. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the quilt stitching. So let's go ahead and first remove our thread. And good practice is always to snip from the top and to remove your thread from the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and take off our fluorescent thread since we're no longer doing any piecing. Now we're actually going to do the quilting and the satin stitching. And the very first one it's going to do is that small green piece that was up at the top. For this particular one, I opted to use the green thread for the machine embroidery. So I'm simply going to lower my foot, hit start. All right, so I can see it's going to do the next quilting. I'm going to go ahead and let it go ahead and do that. So here, I don't really know why they did it, but this is the satin stitch line that is going to go from here to here. They colored it in white, and white on white obviously isn't going to show up. But right now, I don't want to do any satin stitching. I only want to do the quilting. So this one right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it, go ahead and go to the next color. Now, every machine has this feature, every embroidery machine. It's a matter of figuring out how to find it on yours. On the Brothers and on the Baby Locks, it's a matter of clicking this right here and you can advance to the next color. So now you can see it wants to do the quilting here. I do not want to quilt on my black fabric. We'll be doing that later on in this program. But right now, I don't want any color on my black. So I'm also going to skip over that one. And I can see now it wants to do that satin stitch. I'm not going to want to do that either. So I'm going to go ahead and advance that as well. So now it says, well, I'm going to go ahead and do the quilting here. And that is okay. So now I'm going to drop my foot and go ahead and start the quilting there. So we're going to quilt on the green, quilt on the orange, and quilt on the white. If you can't figure out how to advance your stitches using this method, you are more than welcome to come to one of our sit and sews, visit me in the store. We can definitely look at your machine, but I would highly encourage you look at your user manual. I can almost certainly guarantee that you have that feature there. Just look in your user manual to figure out how to do it. Okay, now that we've completed all of the quilting, now we're going to go back and do all of our satin stitching. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to take off the green. And now I'm going to change over to the teal color and put that one on for the satin stitching. Now, if you recall, the previous steps had the other satin stitching, so now we're going to go backward in colors. Don't want to redo the quilting. That's one of them, but there was one before there, so we're going to go look for that one. And it was that first white one that we couldn't see here. And I can see on the screen that's where it's at. And that's the first satin stitching we want to go back and actually stitch in. Okay, so here in filming this, I realized I made a big mistake. Before we started the quilting, we really should put on our water topping. But I'm always so used to doing it for the satin stitching, I didn't even think about it for the quilting. So to get an even better quilted stitch, I should have put this on when we started the quilting. I forgot, but it's most definitely needed when we get to the satin stitching. So now I've remembered, now I'm putting it on. But on yours, make sure you do this before. On the second block, we'll actually do this the correct way. All right, so we got that satin stitch done, and see it wants to go to quilting. We want to skip over that. So now I see the next satin stitch, and yeah, we're ready to do that now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start. All right, we see it wants to do the quilting. We've already done that, so we're going to skip that color. Now it wants to do that final satin stitch. Okay, so the stitching is done. So now I'm going to take it out of the hoop. So the nice thing about this water soluble topper is it's so thin it can just kind of peel right off. So I'm able to take that right off. And then also, remember I talked about in video 1 using a really lightweight tearaway. So that's the other really nice thing, is this just really quickly and rather gently will just tear away from your block. Now, here is where I do have to use my tools, and I will admit it was tedious taking out the stabilizer from each and every one of these slants. I'm going to go ahead and get started, and then we'll pause in a couple of areas and I'll show you how I did it a little bit easier. So on this one, I found it easiest to take it away from the outer one. And this one was always the toughest one for me, just to kind of get it started. And then what I did is once I tore that off, I was able to easily kind of take it out from the seam and do the next row. So that's what I'm going to work on now. All right, so it does take a while, and like I said, it's about the final feel of your quilt as to why I take the time to do these meticulous things. Now, with that said, if you do have a true tearaway wash away, we'll be stocking it in our store very soon. What I would actually recommend is spraying this and then taking off the quilting lines. If you only have the tearaway that I was using, it's very lightweight. It doesn't appear to tear out easy, but it actually does. It tears out very, very easily. It just takes time to go through and do all the tearing. Even if you used wash away and tear away, you're still going to have to just take the time to get all of that off of there. So since you're doing 8 blocks, what I would recommend is stitching out all 8 and then just sitting down with a great Netflix movie and a little trim bin and just start picking it all off and then trimming them down in the end. It's a great Netflix viewer thing. All right, so we've gotten this one done. We're now going to move on to doing this block again, but now we're going to do it for this piece. So in this one, we lay out the fabric a little bit differently, as you can see. So we're going to go through that example right now. So we have our placement stitch, so now we're going to lay down our batting. Okay. Now I'm going to tack down the batting. All right, so the block comes together pretty fast, but now we're going to be ready for doing the stitching. So I've put on my water-soluble topper, and so the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to do the quilting over on that top piece, and this time I'm opting to use my gold-colored thread. Now, if you recall, on these blocks, I do not want to embroider over the black fabric. So the next one is for the left fan. I don't want to do that. That one is black, so I'm going to skip over it. Also, if you recall, we do the satin stitching at the end. So I'm also going to go ahead and skip over that as well. So next it shows the quilting on the right-hand fan. I don't want to do that. And I also don't want to do that satin stitching now either. So now we're going to do the quilting down at the bottom, and that I do want to do, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch that out. All right, now that the quilting is done, I'm going to go back and work on the satin stitches. So I'm going to go back quite a few. Now this one, I just happened to remember how many steps back. This is that left-hand satin stitch, so I'm going to stitch that out first. Then I will do the right, and then I'll do the part that's over this last piece. So I'm going to go ahead and advance to do the other satin stitching, which is right there. Only at advance 1. And now that that part's done, I'm going to go ahead and advance to do the very last satin stitch at the bottom. Okay, now that our embroidery is all done, this is no different than how we did the previous block. We're going to take off all the water-soluble topping. We're going to remove all the stabilizer from the back, and then we're going to trim this down to have only a 1/2 inch seam allowance all along the back. Okay, so now you have all of your blocks done. And like I said, they stitch out really fast. Once you kind of know how to hop around on the embroidery, you kind of end up with everything really good to go. So what I want to discuss now is how I pin it together. So you'll notice on the shop sample, I was able to sew these together so that these lines that are going in these circles all connect, okay? So whenever they go over that seam allowance. And that's a really neat effect. And here's how I got to it. When I put my 2 blocks together and I'm pinning, like I mentioned in the last one, I definitely pin at the 2 corners. So that's kind of where I start first, is just putting in a small pin there. And then a small pin at the other corner. And a lot of times what I like to do as well is you'll sometimes see that I'll stick in, oops, these are hard for me to pick up, they're so small. You'll see that I'll also put in a pin somewhere over here just to kind of keep everything lined up on the other side. Sometimes it helps. So I'm just going to put one here real quick. I then actually took the time to join up each and every one and put a pin in each and every one of these lines for the quilting. So I took the time to pin every single line before I went to the sewing machine. That was how I was able to make sure these all lined up. I did the same thing. Now these are going to line up 1, 2, 3, 4. On this next block they line up horizontally, and the same exact thing, I made sure I pinned at every single one of these joins. Same thing here, I pinned at every single one of these joins. That helped make sure that as I was sewing, things weren't shifting too much and it was keeping it as close as possible. So that's my final recommendation. Just take the time to pin. When you're done, press open your seams to kind of decrease that bulk, and you will be done with 2 very big pieces of your quilt. And that is all that I have for month 2. I hope this information helped you, and we will see you again for month 3.